My name is Leodric, and I am a knight of God. Well, not just any knight. I'm a knight of a special order. A secret order, one under the rule of Richard the Lionheart, King of England. I was tasked with carrying out his orders by any means necessary because it was the will of God. And for the sake of my sins and the sins of my family, I must obey. I must do whatever it takes to complete my mission and be the salvation for Christianity in this world. Now, at this time, I'm on the island of Cyprus, beginning our raids on the heretic kingdoms. And before I begin with my anecdotes and my recent escapades, I must warn you, this is not as glorious as the heralds depict it. My holy mission bears a great cost, more so than my mind, body, and spirit could take. Sometimes I even question if my actions are right, and if my actions will absolve my sins. But to help you understand where this is leading, you will have to understand how my journey begins. England, 1189. The winter is cold. My fingers are freezing and my stomach is desperate for food. Our crops in the fall yielded barely enough food for my family and I. The looks on their faces expressed great despair and loss of hope. I feel as though I am failing my family constantly, over and over. I witnessed my son Alexander curled up in the corner of our humble cobblestone home. My wife Victoria clenches her belly and gazes at me with a look of apathy. With my hands placed under my arms for warmth, I slowly walk over to our food storage bin and search for potatoes to feed my family. There was only enough for 2 people to eat. I stared at the potatoes, and then I slowly gazed over to my wife and kid. I placed the potatoes on the wood-rotted dinner table, and with a sense of purpose, I walked towards my heirloom chest. Victoria and my son got up and approached me with a look of concern. From the chest, I drew my great-grandfather's sword from the Crusades. I unsheathed the sacred blade from its wraps and held the blade up to my face. In confusion, my wife and son took a step back. I stared deeply into the blade as if I was in a trance. I could hear the echoes of hundreds of men and women screaming in pain as this very blade plunges into their mortal flesh. Tears were starting to stream down my eyes as I recalled the stories passed down from my grandfather to his son, and so on until my father told me the stories himself. This hallowed blade had such a malevolent yet holy presence to it. The hilt of the blade was gilded in gold and roughly covered in black leather. The blade itself was the blade of a long sword, but with serrated edges by the center, running down to the crossguard. And the ornament at the end was a golden cross figurine with a black skull and red jeweled eyes in the center. Surely this weapon, this holy item, had some value. My wife, in utter confusion and nervousness, cried out, Leo, my love, what are you doing?" With an expression of defeat, I looked over towards my wife and to my son, and I replied, "We need food, my love." Her eyes squinted in concern. I walked towards her slowly with the hallowed blade in my hand. Victoria and Alexander paced backwards as I approached them with the sword, my eyes fixated on the back of the blade. I continue my steps slowly. My wife whimpered as I draw near. "Leo, what are you doing?" I slowly look up at them, and with great humility, I replied, I think I'm going to sell this to the church. This is a sacred weapon from the Crusades. Surely this will be of value to the church. In return, I may be able to restock our storage bins so that we may eat. With a sigh of relief, Victoria's tense stance against the wall relaxed. She told me that I scared her. I could understand. I was frantic for finding an option, or multiple options, that is, to feed my family. She told me that I almost looked possessed by the blade. I quickly placed the blade down and embraced my family. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you two. I know this is our only heirloom left from that war, but we need food. I'm gonna go to the church and sell it. I know this is not a good idea, but we can then use the money to be able to feed us, hopefully throughout the winter." "It's okay. Just please return quick." "We'll be waiting, my love," replied Victoria. "Now return as swift as possible. Eat the last of the potatoes. You two need them." I embarked on my small journey to the church alone, with my wolf pelt cloak tightly wrapped around my upper body and the blade dangling. I made my way. The church was about 30 minutes away, but our horse died in the beginning of winter, so I was traveling on foot. On my trek towards the church, all I could think about was my Victoria and Alexander, and the guilt that I am bearing for forsaking my family by selling their most sacred item. With the wind chill and the harsh frozen path lacerating my already torn boots, this was proving to be a test of faith in itself. I'll do anything, whatever it takes, to protect and feed my family. After 30 minutes of being in the blistering cold, I finally reached the church. With the sense of salvation, I opened the doors to the church and removed my hood that saved my ears from frostbite. The bishop welcomed me into the house of God, and I walked towards him. He came down from his altar, and he was accompanied by a man draped in black clothing with piercing eyes. I was nervous of this approaching bishop and whoever he was with. Eventually, I kneeled down before the bishop and bowed my head. I whispered to myself, "God forgive me. I am not worthy of your grace. God forgive me. I am not worthy of your grace." As the bishop finally approached me, he placed his hand on my shoulder and calmly spoke to me in a pleasant, peaceful tone. "My son, how may the church aid you?" The other man, cloaked in black, stared at me with his piercing eyes, as if he was observing my every move. I raised my head to make eye contact with the bishop, and I calmly made my statement. It took a lot of inner strength to do this, but I had to. "Father, I am a man of the faith, and I am a devoted husband to my wife and child. This past fall, our crops have barely made us food. And now my family is down to the last 2 potatoes. The priest waved his hand in my face and began to speak in a tone that sounded like he was gonna say no. But before he finished, I cut him off from his response. Look, I'm sorry, Father. I know you may think I'm begging for money, but I'm not. I came here because I have a priceless relic from the last Crusades. And with great humility, I wish to relinquish my great-grandfather's sword in exchange for coin to feed my family. I unsheathed the blade, and as the hilt was exposed, the bishop and the mysterious man's eyes widened. The mysterious man approached me and extended his hand out to receive the sword. I released the sword from my possession to him. He held the sword and his mouth opened wide in awe. The bishop also gazed in awe at the blade. The mysterious man studied the sword for many moments, and then he shook his head quickly and vigorously towards the bishop and retreated in a swift pace towards a room behind the altar and vanished. The bishop, in confusion and astonishment, told me that it was unfortunate, but it would be a sin to sell this holy sword, no matter the reason. I felt broken, completely shattered. My one chance to be able to have money to feed my family, gone. In dismay, I left the church and stood out onto the dirt patch road that led towards the market. I had no choice. I needed food for my family. Maybe one of the vendors would take the sword, but I know I would not get enough money, as if I sold it to the church. As I walked towards the market, the sun began to set. I needed to hurry. I eventually arrived at the marketplace, but the entire court was completely empty. But something felt off. The hairs on my arm stood at its end. A haunting, tingling feeling shot up my spine. Something's about to happen to me. I know it. I've had this feeling before. The last time I felt this, I was minding my own business, riding home, when I was attacked by bandits. Instinctively, I drew my blade and slowly rotated my body. As I did, I heard multiple footsteps moving slowly around me at all angles. As I rotated back to a full 360 degrees, I froze completely in my place. 2 knights, completely geared in black-plated armor, cloaked, revealed themselves from the shadows behind the fabrics of the market stall. My jaw was chattering from the cold before, but now it's out of fear. I raised my sword and rested the blade on my left elbow. I positioned my left foot forward and lightly raised the right foot on the ball of it, in a position where I was quick to pivot if I had to. My heart rate accelerated as they slowly approached me. And as they did, I yelled, asking who they were and what did they want. But without even acknowledging my desperate question, they continued forward and drew their weapons. One drew 2 short swords with black and gold handles. The other, an axe with also a gold and black handle. The distance between us was closing. I didn't know what to do. If I ran, I could possibly outrun them, but I heard footsteps from all angles. It's a safe assumption that I am, in fact, surrounded. If that is the case, I will never be able to see my family and feed them. If I fight them and manage to kill them quickly, there is a chance that I can quickly loot their pockets and have money to get food and feed my family. Either way, there's no avoiding this, it seems. It will end in bloodshed. The night closed in on me. I have no choice. I must engage. Within a split second, the knight with the axe lunged at me with full force and with a vertical swing. With the speed of a frightened, trapped animal, I managed to evade the attack. However, part of my hair was cut from the slice. I could feel the wind from the axe scream past my ear. I pivoted my body quickly to the side, and with the torque of my body, the blade that I was holding managed to slice the neck armor of the knight. To my reluctance, the knight collapsed, and I managed to take him out with an accidental counterblow. As the knight fell, I managed to witness the crest of a lion on his breastplate. I choked on my breath. Everything around me slowed down, and I watched the knight flail his arms toward his neck. And the crest of Richard the Lionheart became even more exposed, with the glistening of the setting sun shining upon it. I knew at that moment I took down a knight of King Richard. I was fixated on the falling knight, I will be honest. And that was my mistake. Because moments later, I felt a slice of a blade rip across my back. I was struck. I was struck by the knight with two swords. I fell to the ground, dropping my sword in the act. As I hit the ground, the air in my lungs escaped completely. I was gasping for air desperately and bleeding through my wolf pelt. I can feel the cold wind enter in my wounds, stinging sharply, and the dirt mixing into my mangled flesh. Painful agony was all I could feel. Instinctually, I rolled over immediately to recover, but only to see the knight lunging towards me with both of his blades descending in a stabbing motion. I felt as though these were my last moments. Oh, what a sad life this has been. A life of starvation, a life of cruelty, abuse from my father and from the world. I am truly a worthless man, not worthy of Victoria and Alexander. But as I begin to accept my fate, my life flashed before my eyes. All of the happy moments of my life, what little they were, Alexander and I playing in the fields in the spring, marrying my wife, making love to her, my father dying. The last thing I saw was this strange substate between life and death. And it was the smile of my wife. Something clicked, though. In that moment, I felt the strength of a lion surge through my body. I realized that this was not the end. I refused to die. Before the blades could plunge into me, I managed to kick the knight in the chest with all of my might, sending him back a few feet. The knight landed on his shoulder, dislocating it. Within a split second of him falling and injuring himself, this was my chance to finish him. This was my chance to finally prevail. I grabbed my grandfather's sword from the ground, gripping the hilt tightly with both of my hands. The golden cross and black skull staring me right in the eyes whispered to me, "May your sins be absolved." I placed my foot on the raised shoulder of the knight and rolled him over so that his chest was exposed. With all my might, I raised the hallowed sword with the blade facing down towards his exposed chest. This was it. I will kill this man, and I will kill him for my family. And as I began to bring the blade down upon my enemy, I heard a piercing shout from behind me. "By the order of King Richard, stop!" Once again, I froze, completely petrified. I raised my eyes only to see a dozen other black-armored knights with longbows drawn, ready to fire at me. I threw the blade down on the ground and stepped away from the fallen knight. The dozens of knights quickly closed in on me, and before I could say anything, I heard the sound of a club whistling towards my head, and everything went black. What felt like seconds later may have been hours or days. I opened my eyes, but I was in complete darkness minus a few dim-lighted torches. I was bounded by chains to a flimsy wooden chair. In my mind, I had no idea what the hell was going on. The air had a strong, putrid, decaying musk that was almost overbearing. Where was I taken? What the hell is going on? Who were those knights? And my wife. My son. I wonder if they're okay. They were probably worried about me. All I could think about was if my wife and son were safe. I prayed to God that they were safe and that the knights did not know where they lived. Scared and frustrated, I began wedging my hands against the chains that were binding me to this flimsy chair. And I furiously began to shake. I shook in my chair through anger, and in the process I fell over and the chair broke. For an instant I was ecstatic and relieved. My chains were loose from the chair because of the broken pieces at this point. But now, I'm trying to find any piece of metal to pick the lock of the chains. But when I looked in front of me, from the dim-lighted torches while I'm on the ground, I could see that I was face to face with a decomposing peasant. In pure shock, I instantly puked. I completely emptied my stomach on the rotting head of the corpse. This is pure agony. I don't know why they put me here or where I am, or what did I do to deserve this, but I was here, and I had to figure out a way to get out. As I was thinking about it, and coming up with ideas, I noticed that the corpse had nails sticking out from its head. After witnessing that, I came to the conclusion that I've never been more scared in my life than this moment. However, this didn't stop me. I had to be resourceful. I realized that the nails in the skull of the corpse was just small enough to pick one of the locks. I rushed my shaking hands towards the corpse's head to pry the nail from it. My hands, slippery from the moisture and ooze of the decaying skull, made it near impossible to pull that nail out. As you can imagine, I was freaking out internally, but I had to get free from these chains. I had to think of a way to get the nail out. I sat there for 30 minutes trying to pry the nail out, and I realized I had one last option. A began to slowly position myself towards the head of the decomposing peasant. Shaking through fear and disgust, I had to commit, and so I opened my mouth. I placed my teeth firmly around the rusted, ooze-covered nail. The taste was beyond repulsive. I placed my hands on the side of the skull and pressed my thumbs against the withered remains of the eyeballs. I took one last deep breath, and I yanked my head back. At last, the nail was freed from the skull. But I don't think I'll ever get this nightmare out of my head. Not after this. After splitting up all the ooze and rust from the nail and successfully picking the lock, I realized that these are the lengths that I'm willing to go to escape this place and get back to my family. As I got myself up, I grabbed one of the dim-lighted torches. I began scanning the dark room to see where the exit door was. There it was. A wooden door with iron bars for a window slit. I didn't know what was behind that door, but I surely didn't want to end up like that corpse over there, with nails in its head, only to be pried out by some poor sap's teeth. I had no choice but to continue. I looked through the door and saw darkness, and mustered the courage to open the door and proceed regardless of the outcome. My footsteps echoed through the cobblestone pathway. The path turned to the right, and as I turned the corner, I saw a door with light shooting from the cracks. I pensively walked towards the door at the end of the hall. Once again, I paused and proceeded through. When I walked through that door, I was shocked to see a circular room with a second-story balcony filled with seated men in hoods. In the center of the balcony in front of me, there was a man bigger than all of the others with a chair of gold. His face was hidden like the rest of them. But what spooked me was a man bound to a chair like me in the middle of the main floor, whimpering. I cautiously walked towards the man in the chair, completely bewildered to what was going on. As I reached him, a familiar voice began to make a speech.
Leodric, you are here because you have committed 2 grave sins. You are being charged with assault on 2 royal knights and intent to sell a holy sacred relic in exchange of gold coins. An assault on the royal knight is an assault on the king, and an assault on the king is the assault on the papacy or God himself. What say you?
All seemed lost to me, anyway. It seemed as though I'm going to end up like that corpse. For the man in the chair, I have no idea why he was there. My thoughts were racing all over, trying to piece together everything that has transpired. But I looked back up to the figures above with confidence, and I decided to say my piece. My lords, I am a humble man, and I am a family man, and I am a firm believer of Christ. Yes, I did defend myself from 2 armed knights who drew their weapons on me, and I succeeded. I was minding my own business, doing whatever it took to feed my family, and yes, I did try to exchange my grandfather's sword from the Holy Wars for coin, because it is my sacred duty to do whatever it takes to feed them and protect them. I have no regrets in doing either. I've come to realize that this life is not fair, and I accepted that. But what I do not accept is not fulfilling my sacred duty to my wife, in which I made an oath upon when we married. An oath to protect her and care for her till death do us part. The men whispered and murmured to each other for my response. I see heads nodding, people agreeing. I had a bad feeling that death was imminent. Then a man emerged from next to the man sitting in the golden throne. He raised his hand, and the room fell silent, minus the whimpering man in the chair before me. This was the same man from the church, the cloaked man, and he began to speak.
We have come to an agreement. Your devotion to your family is noted as noble. Your convictions for fulfilling your duty is noted as well. The way you defended yourself for your family is noted as valiant. And your escape from the holding room proves that you are a man who will not stop in the face of death until you fulfill your oaths to your wife. And finally, your will to relinquish your most prized possession for the sake of your family shows us that you are not corrupted by greed.
My eyes widened as I try to gauge what the intentions of this man are, and from everyone else in the room. I try thinking, why am I in here? What is their angle? Who is this man whimpering in the chair? What does he have to do with me? The man who was cloaked from the church continued to speak.
But you have committed these sins. However, if you could save your family and see your family again, would you do whatever it takes? If you could feed them, if you could feed your family forever, would you do whatever it takes? And if you could have your sins absolved and guarantee you and your family's passage to heaven, would you do whatever it takes?
I paused a moment to think. What was all of this entailing? And as I raised my hand to stroke my chin in thought, the entire balcony rose to their feet, but the man in the golden chair. I gazed at the group of men before me, thinking on my next words. But I let my impulsivity take the best of me. For God and my family, I would do anything. The cloaked man spoke once more.
If you are truly a man of your word, your sins may be absolved. However, you must take the first step. This man in front of you is a defiler of women, a murderer, and a heretic.
My heart dropped. I knew where he was going with this, and I knew what he was going to ask of me.
If you seek eternal salvation, you must vanquish this man for his sins and cast him into the fires of hell.
At that moment, a trapdoor opened in front of the man. Flame and smoke billowed from the trapdoor. The room ominously lit up with a bright red flare. The man then throws my sword from the balcony, and it clanks and tumbles to my feet.
This sword, as you know, is sacred. It is known as the Reaper. The man who wielded it was a part of a secret order. The order was known as the Angels of Death. They were the vanquishers of evil, God's will. And from the shadows, cities occupied by evil have fallen. During the Crusades, the Angels of Death paved the way to victory. This order was sacred. This order was holy. And this order is dead.
I paused. Dead? My grandfather was part of a secret order known as the Angels of Death. And it's dead. This is the first time I've heard of any of this. And it's dead. The man continued his speech.
After the last Crusades, the order dissolved. Now a new order has rose from the ashes of the old. A new dawn rises from the shadows of night. A new crusade is about to begin, and King Richard spoke to the papacy. The Pope spoke with God, and God said that it is time to take back Jerusalem. It is time to assemble the lions of our realm, the lions with legacy, the lions of devotion and the lions of valor. But when we face the heretics of the East and the Saracens, they will know fear that the shadows of death will come for them. Our king offers you absolute immunity, immense wealth, and absolution of your sins. If you are willing to resurrect your family's holy legacy and commit, you have two choices: death or duty.
So these are my choices. Joining a zealot new secret order, fighting in the name of God and the kingdom of Christianity, or death. I looked back up at the man who was speaking, and he finished off his speech saying, "The choice is mine." They patiently waited for my response. I took a moment to think about what this would do to me, what this would do to my soul, the cause that they were fighting. I'm not gonna lie, as a Christian, it is my sacred duty to defend Christendom. Like my great-grandfather before me, he was fighting for Christ. And to think about it, this may change my family's life for the better. And our sins will be absolved. If that is the case, then killing this man, that would be a sin and instant execution for a commoner. However, I would be forgiven. Everything that I've done or will do would be forgiven. I think I have my answer. I picked up the sword, the Reaper, wielded by an angel of death, and without hesitation, I cleaved the helpless, whimpering man's head clean off. I could see every muscle fiber twitching, every vein, every artery pulsing with blood, squirting everywhere. The eyes on the head rolling around as the head fell to the ground. The man's body flailing around in the chair sent shivers down my spine, and a feeling of remorse grew thick in my mind. I lowered my bloodied sword, looked up to the men in the balcony, and then I snapped out of my foolish thoughts. I kicked the headless body into the fiery pit where the trapdoors were. And at that moment, the cloaked man in the golden chair rose. In a deep, burly voice, he spoke to me.
Well done, Leodric.
The man revealed himself. I could not believe my eyes. I thought I would never see this in my lifetime. But the man who was in that chair was King Richard himself.
You have made your choice, and might I say, with swift purpose. In choosing to kill this wretched maggot who sat before you, you chose your life instead of death. Now, as you understand, because you killed this man, this is a soul-binding agreement to us, and to fight for Christendom. I do apologize for the circumstances that you were recruited. However, as the sacred rites dictate, those who are descendants of our secret orders must go through the crucible. And this was yours. And because you have succeeded and chose to vanquish this evil, your sins are absolved. Your crimes are forgiven, and your family will be moved to the royal castle where they will be fed, clothed, and bathed in wealth. Now, you are no longer a man. You are now a lion. Leodric, welcome to the Order of the Black Lions.
As soon as King Richard stopped speaking, the men on the balcony drew their swords and chanted, "Hail, Leodric, Knight of God, Black Lion of Christ." I could not believe what I heard and what I had just endured. This was all a test, a crucible that they planned the moment that that man saw my sword in the church. I heard whispers of another holy war starting, but I never thought it would be in my lifetime. And I never thought that I would be recruited, let alone be forced into becoming a member of a secret order. Joining this order and killing that man may have absolved me of my sins and brought wealth to my family. But as happy and as traumatized as I was at that moment, I did not realize the amount of agony, suffering, and wrath that I would endure and that I would inflict on other people in making that decision of becoming a black lion. So, now you know how I became a knight of God. And to bring all this back from what is going on currently, my fellow knights and I prepare to sack Cyprus, and I must gather as much information as possible so that we will have the strategic advantage. Now, if you will excuse me, I must do my duty and torture these prisoners that our scouts have brought back. It may take a few fingers, limbs, or nails to the head for these heretics to talk. May God have mercy on my soul.